start. I'm also gonna do a sort of like a voice check. So give it a minute. All right, you murderers of murderers. Give me maybe give me an emote if my sound is okay. Again, we have to do these sound checks every time now. We do a little space. And we have to do them because yeah, I don't know. Twitter malfunctions sometimes with my microphone. So give me an emote if my voice is okay. There we go. We got a thumbs up from Chino. Thank you, my friend. A fun one, quick one today. Um, right. You know, this one even has like a sort of a cynical, sort of like vibe to it. Um, Numerology against Jesus. I just want to remind everyone everything. Um, there's a certain weirdness of stepping into conflict with people when sort of like you understand, well, people in general and who they are, and um in order to avoid certain confusions, I guess, um a very important element in pursuing a path of spirituality or sort of like esoteric learning and so on and so forth is to be able to look at yourself from the side and say, has this made me a better person? Not a more powerful person, not a more influential person, not a more sophisticated person, not someone who's more flashy or charismatic, not someone who plays the game of life better, or knows how to roll the dice, or knows how to breathe into the dice so they end up rolling. But you know what I'm saying? Um, a very important part of it is that, so if you depart from that formula, that formula should, in most cases, be why one begins a journey of wanting to know more and learn more and so on and so forth. You have an understanding that something along the way went very, very wrong, right? When a soul succumbs to the temptation of power, right? And I'm not saying we're, all saints here. We're not. We've each and every one of us, we've made mistakes and that type of thing. But when a soul succumbs to the temptation of something as specific as power, or when they have self-aggrandizement and so on and so forth, when they reach into the formulaic, right? Let's say they become very knowledgeable about numerology and astrology, and before they were more knowledgeable, let's say, about life itself. It's always very healthy to remind oneself that, again, we live in a world that will mirror yourself to you. We live in an input output world, and what that means is, if I master numerology, paradoxically, right? If my ego mind is so involved in doing so and achieving this sort of like self status of the master of numerology, that is the best way I can entrap myself within that formulaic science. And I'll explain to you how and why, right? If all I input into my life is numerology, so if I say numerology supersedes everything, right? It's the greatest formulaic art. It supersedes all things, including miracles. right? Then what I'm basically inputting into my reality, into my life, because as we know, the universe responds to your input, right? What I'm inputting is the laws and rules and boundaries of those numerological, formulas and recipes. So if I say, well, numerology says that today is going to be some kind of day, right? Um, I've basically become enthralled by my own input. So the better you get at something, like let's say in a formulaic sense, the better you get at physiognomy and you read a person's face and your physiognomy is telling you one thing, yet your intuition, your intuitive mind that goes beyond the input output system is telling you a completely different thing. Uh, let's say someone who's I don't know, fashioned themselves as a master of the art would always say, well, the formulaic, here's the proof, you're no better than science. This is what science does, right? Here's the proof. And, because this is the proof, this is what the formulaic sort of like guidance system that I have has shown me, it supersedes that. So, every moron with a religious doctrine or some sort of spiritual theory or agenda lives under the shadow of the bias of that religious doctrine. Do you know why? Because life is incredibly wise in how it unfolds itself. And how it unfolds itself to the creative mind, the creative mind being the person who's inputting certain realities and programs into from their internal to their external reality, right? Life will give you what you want. It will give you what you want to believe. So let's say if I use my belief system to say, like rainy days are meditation days and non rainy days are not meditation days. Life will give me that. It will give me meditative days on rainy days and non meditative days on non rainy days. I will have thought myself a god and my ego will have grown because, well, I figured it out. I figured out the truth. That is why this system, because this world, in its ultimate brilliance and intellectual design, paralogical intellectual design, is so grand and so great, that it feeds into the bias of whoever is inputting programs, well, onto its system. So when I input a program and that program is delivered back to me, I'm a moron who's convinced myself, aha, I have figured out reality. This is what reality is. And you've given it a name and you've given it a boundary. And the moment you do that, you have lessened yourself as what you are as a spiritual thing, right? Because what you are is not the observation and study of the formulaic symptoms of what you'd like to call the matrix, right? But what you are is the belief system that you've imparted onto this matrix. So it's always funny to me when someone comes to me and they say, "Oh, I have this, world view and world system that is yada yada yada." Um, it's very important to understand the difference between the journeyman and the true master, because the true master is a formless thing. The journeyman is convinced that he's a master, that he's an expert, right? And they have to find this way. They have to find a niche because the master of something is the master of everything. So let's say if I am the master of the sword in my village, in the next village or in some larger village, I'll have to become the master of the long sword because I can't be the master of the sword because there's more competition. Then I have to become the master of a piercing form of the law of the medieval longsword, right? And then I have to become a master of this specific move within the martial arts of the longsword. So this is why specificity and certain niches exist. So let's say if someone's a master of numerology, why can't they also be a master of astrology? Well, because that's where they find their weakness, whether that's where their biases fail, that's where their belief system crumbles. It's very important to understand that in general, spiritual pursuit does not preach departure from ego for the sake of departure from ego. It's very important you understand that ego is that which imparts certain biases into your life. And this is why the ego is considered to be a blinding thing. So you couldn't have figured out some sort of formulaic pattern or system that inherently works in the world. I'll tell you why you were able to figure that out. Because as a collective species, collectively we have sort of like input that into the collective reality. So yes, there are archetypal energies, there are archetypal stories, there are archetypal meanings and symbols that live in the collective unconscious of man. And yes, we all collectively impart those meanings onto certain numbers and events and dates. For example, if we change the calendar, right, or how we, on a global scale, massively how we viewed, the passage of the times and the seasons, they would submit to our will because we would be inputting different truths and realities onto these things. So yes, when the collective creates the matrix, right, the three-dimensional matrix, and when the collective inputs something. So, for example, as a collective, we can input this is a sport called football, and these are the rules and laws and boundaries of the sport of football. And then someone, because we've inputted these laws and boundaries, could come out and say, "Well, I'm an expert at football. I have memorized the exact rules, laws, boundaries, and sort of like forms of engagement that have to do with football," right? Does that make football an ultimate truth? In an abstract, conceptualized manner, football doesn't even exist as a concept or entity. Numerology, astrology, and all of the formulaic sciences, albeit on a larger scale, are the same. And I want everyone to understand. I truly do. If you follow me, if you've learned something under me, I want you to understand the the limits, or like the distance, that or the spiritual distance that these formulaic arts are able to take you is really not that far. They are to be respected because they mirror the collective creation, right? But they are not the end game. They are not, they are very far from the end game. Yet the person engaging so boldly and so intimately with, let's say, numerology, for them it feels like the end game. For them it feels like they figured it out, when in truth they're the ones with their creative godly mind, with the spark of creation and divine ability to bring forth creation, right, and mold it onto their will. What they're doing is they're just inputting their incredible biases onto the mirror world. This is why we call the three-dimensional world the mirror world. So I don't blame people who don't know this, let's say, who don't know what this world is. And most people are confused and they wish to become in a state of non-confusion, but they don't wish to do the work for it. They don't wish to do the spiritual work for it, right? To receive this knowledge. And what I'm saying, probably for, someone who can look at it from an objective standpoint, it's mind shattering for them, right? They think they figure out how the world works. These are the patterns that unfold, and all I'm telling them is like, my friend, you've read an observant interpretation on how the collective mind currently works and unfolds, and what kind of sort of like shapes and forms and truths we impress collectively on a collective level upon the world. And all you've done is really just, observe and study this, and props to you. You've done a great job at doing so, or perhaps you've done a great job at learning. But this is only the first step in a long and tumultuous spiritual journey that you have embarked on. And the moment you grow spiritually is the moment you abandon the input output system. Because when you realize what the world is, you are stricken with an incredible feeling of emptiness and loneliness, but also awe. And if you're not ready for that darkness, and most people are not ready for this darkness, if you're not ready for that darkness, you cannot pass on to the next stage of understanding and knowing. And I want everyone to know this. So when we go, and even myself, when we sort of like descend into sort of like argumentative, tones and drama, and we're human, okay? It's going to happen. Now there's a conflict of interest, and that's why we're here. It's part of the lesson. When we sort of like devolve ourselves into this state, um, the fault lies with everyone, including, let's say, myself, right? Because I'm choosing to do so. I'm choosing to input this so that it can be outputted back to me. Now, the sort of like, let's say, the wise master or the jester or the trickster mind, right, which is not always a malicious one, by the way. What it does, it creates these theater, right? It creates this theater of life in order to raise up the knowledge and the knowing and the consciousness of the other. So the best conflicts are all theater, right? And they're and the greatest wizened minds are all actors and actresses, right? um and all of this theater unfolds for you to, let's say, receive this information, or for us to even, have a reason to talk about these things. It's more entertaining, and entertainment is not the best way to learn, but is the only way to learn, my dearest friends. I want to keep it short today, but I want everyone to understand that um what you input into your reality will very soon become your reality. This is from um my little book, right? This is the seven keys. Believe that a higher form of magic than belief exists, and so it shall be, right? And because belief itself, right? So if you believe that a higher form of magic exists beyond belief, it will be. But this is a paradox because you believed it into being. So belief is always the highest form of magic. I really want you to think on this. I really, really, really want you to think on this. Right? I'm gonna read it to you again. This is the key of truth that we call, right? The highest form of the art, meaning manifestation magic, let's say input output. The highest form of the art is belief, as it supersedes all other sister forms of magic. Believe that there is a higher form of magic above belief itself, and so it will be. For even the exception to this rule is no true exception, because of the rule itself. So be very careful what you're willing to believe, because this world, to test you and your ego and your spiritual readiness and willingness, will output those same biases that feed those beliefs. And God bless you if you fall into the trap, into the fractal form of having convinced yourself, as the lesser ego has, that it has figured out everything and it is all that can ever exist, when all it really is a fractal, a mirror standing in front of another mirror, endlessly reflecting itself onto itself, feeding its own biases. Yet is there true depth to the reflection of two mirrors? Can you reach into the mirror and explore? No, there is no true depth. Whoever needs to understand this, right? Whoever has the mind to understand it, the eyes to see, ears to hear, the mind to comprehend, the state of consciousness to sort of like shelter this not knowing in their hearts and in their minds, they will. Hope everyone has a good day.